Hi, I'm Andrew Armstrong and welcome to the Back Office Teardown Lab. A few weeks ago I covered this where I put an SDR internal into it by hacking into its USB lines, and that was great. But you might recall in that video I expressed the desire to actually hook up GPS, and this was the adapter I had at the time. It was £3 on Amazon. But it wasn't really a really nice way to mount it, because when you take it out of the case, it's the antenna and the circuits are all integrated. So I had a look on Amazon and I found this device. You can see it's magnetic. It's basically the same thing, really, but with an external type enclosure and a wire. And it is a bit bulky, you can see, but it did seem that you could offer more ways of mounting it by potentially maybe putting it on the back like this. I'd hope that would be sufficient for it to get a signal. Again, still kind of limited, but definitely less limited than this. But I thought, okay, we're going to put that in. We knew that there was a spare USB port internal to that, but it was definitely not as attractive because we would have to solder almost directly onto the pin. So I found this device, again on Amazon, for a couple of pounds, really quite cheap. And I'll show you. It comes as a kit because the idea is that you're going to mount it in this little box. So it's quite nice that it actually comes in an enclosure. And the idea is that you would have a USB wire soldered to there, because you can just about see the ground, positive, minus and power lines there. And then you'll notice on this side two sets. So it's basically a little USB hub. So the idea is this would be one of those devices that would come in there and you'd wire it directly. We would wire the SDR directly onto the other channel, and with these remaining pins that would just go to the USB pin out where we soldered our SDR last time. And then if you want to actually have it all in a nice looking enclosure, and if you're doing it properly, maybe you're making a device that's going to live with some real world hardware outside of an enclosure, you've got this little case. So yeah, it seemed neat. Let's open it up and see what we can do. You can see I'm using an upturned mouse mat here because I don't want to scratch that nice little screen. And I'm not sure if I showed you on a previous video, but I did 3D print this nice little cover that just clips on over the front. So that's actually quite good too, but it might get in the way with what we're trying to achieve right now. And one temptation is to print your own back for this, because if you have your own 3D printed plastic enclosure, you wouldn't have any issues with the RF, so you might be able to have more of these antennas mounted internally. Again, so much possibilities, so little time. Let's pop the lid off gingerly. So it's actually all stayed together quite well. I mean, this hasn't been opened since we last covered this. And you can see the SDR is still in place, the battery's still in place, and this big wad of, I think it was compound, I can't remember what I made that out of. It is just there to hold that. So I'm going to take the batteries out. You definitely don't want them to run amok. And I'm going to remove some of that cloth tape, revealing our wiring to the USB. Now technically we don't actually have to change that end at all. I'm just getting our little circuit out. You could do a lot with this, couldn't you? You could actually just hot glue that right there so it stood up, and then just you're ready to go. But I'm going to just take this out to remind myself what were the pin outs here. And looking at that, yeah, I can't quite remember. We have to have a look at the standard pin outs for a USB plug to see what it was. I'm guessing by the fact that that red wire there probably isn't the positive, because it's, well, it might be. Yeah, no point guessing. Okay, well, I think I've sort of figured it out. It's all a little bit, there's a little bit of malarkey, shall we say, because when you see the pin outs for this here, basically you have this as your ground pin, which means then this is your data positive, data minus, and then this would be your 5 volts, which is kind of the opposite of this. And again, you can see how these bits on the ribbon cable are flipped. It's because if you had to make the adjustments, because the pins this end don't match quite there as well. So just be careful. I'm sure there's a good chance of getting it wrong, and if you do, again, just be patient with it, and hopefully, you know, you'll suss it out. So you can see we've got those splayed out and tinned. I'm just going to go right ahead now and tin the 4 pads we're going to need here, which is the ground, data positive, data minus, VCC. Now this is where it gets interesting. I think we're looking at data positive. You can have a look. I know it's a bit crowded here. We'll figure it out. There's our data minus. And I believe this pin was VCC, conveniently. Which means we have to get that ground just dragged over to this other side. We'll strip it back a little bit. Oh, it's just a bit short now, but that'll do. We'll get ground over there. Let's apply some heat, and with a bit of luck, I mean, that would work. So assuming this wiring is correct, which I've no doubt it's not, I can go ahead and actually just solder our module, although I've got to resolder it, I damaged this, to one of these connector pins here, and this device should just function normally, and that's the dream. So if that works normally, then that's great, and then we can think about adding to this one. Now, something to consider here, we're going to have to chop this, and it comes with several meters of wire. We've got nothing to lose really. I might as well just yoink, cut it right now. So we've cut off the USB cable. I probably ought to have tested it first, but we'll assume it just works. And then if we're a bit lucky, I'm going to have a guess before we strip the wire. Black, red, white and green. Here we go. Black, red, white and green. Now I'm not entirely sure what's the positive and the minus on the white and on the green, but the fact that they have some sort of standard is very reassuring. And before we cut this wire to length, what I can do, of course, is just strip these down. In fact, I'm almost tempted, rather than wiring in our SDR module, why don't we just go for broke and solder in this GPS? I've got an unreliable source that says white is data minus, so I'm going to just tack that there so I don't forget. And we can zoom right in. And once you've got the data minus hooked, all the rest just makes sense, don't they? So you've got the red for the VCC, like so. You've got the green for the data plus. If you can grab him, it's a slippery sort. And don't short those two together. And then you've got your black, which is your ground. So the last command I ran was cat/dev/tty/acm0. So you can see this acm0 is a serial terminal that's connected, which is this thing. And then we run it, you can see the NMEA GPS coming straight off there. So that is actually working. I mean, it's not actually showing satellites because it's not outdoors, but this is really amazing as far as you really want it to get. So if I turn it over, you'll see it's just all hooked up. So we lucked out. We lucked out that this is on the correct pin out, and I guess we lucked out that my resource on the internet was correct about the data minus being the white wire. So let's think about how we're going to proceed. I'm going to pop the batteries out. Should have probably shut down the Raspberry Pi, but I'm too lazy now. So this is our actual wire for this guy. My thought process is saying basically cut this down to maybe this long and we'll hook it here and out through a little hole or aperture we'll make in the case, we should be able to flip it round so it sticks onto the back. Now, if we want to, we can try to route it through that hole. I think that's a good idea. That'll be advantageous to do that, so we don't have to make any holes in the case. The only other thing we might want to think about is that this clearly was magnetic. Unbeknownst to me, it was magnetic, just about. Which does mean if we want to mount this somewhere on the back, and you've got to bear in mind there is that metal frame that does go over it here. Yeah. So let's say we want to mount it somewhere on the back. We could probably glue, I mean, I was thinking about drilling a hole and fitting it, but you can probably just glue a metal washer here, or something that will want that magnet to stick to it. And that would be kind of cool, because then the magnet would stick there. It wouldn't be in the way when you want to dismantle it. You can take it off, and then potentially you've got the ability to mount this on a different type of rig in the future. So yeah, be careful with cutting the wire. Maybe we don't cut it so short. We know in the case there's a bit of room here, so we can just leave it a little bit longer. I mean, that's, you know, the camera can't see that, but that's more than long enough, I should think. Because if you're going to go really much longer than that, why wouldn't you just use one of these external ones? So I'm just going to go chomp, cut it right there. And you're probably asking, why didn't you unsolder it? Well, I have an idea. I want to probably strip some of this wire, and I'll use this rather nice red, white, green, black wire to hook our SDR back up once we're ready for that. So just to show you how I did strip and tin that wire. Took that like so, so you got your 4 colours there, and you can, I think you can do them all at once if you want, but individually take your side cutters, gentle squeeze, little nibble, gentle squeeze, little nibble, gentle squeeze, a little nibble, one more gentle squeeze, and one more little nibble. And then with your soldering iron set to suitably ridiculously hot, actually it's only set to 250, just give a little touch, just a little touch with a bit of solder on the end. You want to make sure the solder's there, because that flux is really going to help soak down through that wire, and it's giving me grief. Got to hold it down with something. And we're done pretty much. Let's see how we can route this. So we've got our tinned wire. Make sure you tin it first. So I'm going to do some okey cokey, pig in a pokey. Let's get that through here. I'll show you where I'm trying to go. It's through this little hole here. We need to make sure we're all tweezed up for this action here. Like so. Now I do really want to see what's going on with the Wi-Fi antenna at some point, because it's so bad. The performance is so bad for some reason. Yoink. And I don't know how we're going to route this finally, but I suspect something like that would work. Right through. Be a bit careful when you're playing with this, of course, because it is running over the compute module, and you don't want to really smash that down too much. I'm going to pull it quite short, as if I'm going to mount it on the back case. So that's out of the way. So let's focus on here. You've got these terminals which I've pre-tinned, that's why there's those blobs on them. And we're just going to follow that same colour scheme, red, white, green, black. Let's go here. Red. Oop. I think we're going to have to get a little bit of help on this one. Right. What a handy little chip though, eh? Double up your USBs. Now, it's probably USB 1, maybe USB 2, who knows. So that would be interesting if there's a performance issue because of that. I can't read any writing on it, so it's been erased from its existence. Now we've got to put our SDR back in. If I'm not mistaken, I can tell from these little marks that it was mounted somewhere like here. So we don't really need a massive amount of cable, so let's put 2 nuts. The way I'd probably approach this is just to cut this one here and just slide this off. Now we know exactly what our 4 colours mean, which is brilliant. It's actually standardised at this point, which is very handy. It's almost a shame that the pinouts onto the actual daughter board here were not just in the standard way. In fact, why didn't they bring out that other additional USB port pinouts? It's very weird. Cool whip. Okay. Ready for tinning? So have many of you done this type of project at home? I should imagine that there'll be some keen interest in adding the SDR and the additional USBs to this thing. So if you have though, yeah, please feel free to comment down below. Just going to go in now and take these off. It's a bit of a mess. Let's be fair, last time when we did this project it was all very experimental. Okay, here we go. We've got red, white, green, black is what we're going for, so let's just get the red on. Once you've made the start, that's good stuff here. Red. Could do with more hands. White. Take a gander at that soldering. That is absolutely shocking. That's some bad stuff right there. However, I will allow it. So let's mount the module background. I'm going to hope it all works. So I'm just going to put this in on the assumption that it's all going to work nicely. Am I brave enough to put the back case on? That is debatable. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I had this block of stuff here. I'm just going to route this wire away from that heatsink area that's going to go on here when we pop that case back on. Right, let's hold her steady. I think I'm going to be brave and actually put the lid on. Yes, I am. Let's do that. Let's assume it's all going to work because we're very positive people. And that is lining up quite positively nicely. And there you have it. It's actually FM demodulating broadcast radio, which I've got on quite quiet, so YouTube doesn't pick that up. You can see that going on. But if I scroll over here to this background window, there you have satellite NMEA codes coming. And no doubt if I was outside, we would be seeing some actual GPS data coming through. This is as far as I've got though. I don't know what to do with it. Apart from logging that GPS data, I don't know how you get any kind of maps and things like that appearing on here. So we'll have to figure that part out. Now the decision will be, how do we adhere it to there? Well, barring sticking some sort of metallic object like a big washer, which I'm not sure I have right now, I think you could just get away with some tape. So let's explore how that might look, and this would be probably a good opportunity to use a command strip if you have one. I don't have a command strip. I've got something far worse in many respects, and that's this 3M type foamy tape, and I don't know if you've ever used it, but it is generally insanely tenacious. However, needs must, and I would like to just get on with some other projects in my life, and this would be nice to close, because sometimes with these things it's nice to get the hardware bit out of the way, doesn't it? So then you can put some time into the fiddling around with the software bit, and if you can get rid of all that hardware jankiness, hence screw it all back together, that will just at least mean when you're playing with it it's less likely to short out and do something nasty. Yeah. Now I'm not saying, because I don't know, what's the specifications of that USB splitter type doodad that we installed. So you might want to check that if that affects your throughput or anything like that, because potentially it is eating up some of the USB bandwidth. I'm going to close down the actual satellite stuff. We can see the NMEA messages still coming through, which is great. It hasn't balked. I mean, there's not that many of them, but I want to just get back into the cubic SDR, which is this. There we go. And I would like those pop-ups to just bum away. Right. And that looks quite good. I mean, in terms of performance, it's flashing away and doing its things and just looking pretty normal, so that's good. Now I have that power bulge stuck on the back, and you can see it sits really nicely. Actually, that's quite a good base. It's probably better than that because it's tilting it slightly. It does look a lot better to my eye, and it's actually pretty stable. I know it's not the clearest thing to see in the world, but I am in a vehicle. I drove around with this, and you can see that fuller amount of data on the screen. That shows you that is actually receiving GPS, and that is at that orientation where that's pointing down. I have tried to install some various software in here. There's something called Navit, N-A-V-I-T, and I think it will take some configuring, but it looks pretty cool because it seems to be an open source GPS type software. But I've not fathomed yet how to get this to hook up to that GPS. So if you've got any experience of that, that would be really useful, because the data is definitely there. I did also install something called GPSD, which I think is a GPS daemon. But again, when I run that, you saw the GPS data there when we accessed that serial port directly. But when I asked the daemon to do it, it's not pulling that out for some reason. So there's still some tuning to be done. There you have it, the heady combination of software-defined radio and now GPS receiver all in one package. And the best thing about this is, internally you still have one more USB port doing nothing that you can hook onto directly, or again use one of those modules. In fact, it does say something on it. Actually just NFHKPCBA, whatever that is. And then add additional 2 more USBs internally. So you've got plenty of USBs, and you can see there that the case sits nice and tidy, and that actually is not bad at all. It doesn't get in the way when you're using it because it's right in the middle. It actually sits quite nicely on there, and it performs admirably even in a vehicle when this is face down on a car seat. So I mean, it's sensitive enough for whatever you're going to need. Please comment down below, like, subscribe if you're that way inclined, and as ever, thank you for watching.